Connection podcast with Alvin Reed, Bradford Bruns, and Marty Jenkins on 101 ESPN.
Fighting Irish, Buckeyes, T-minus 1 week and 1 week only until those two titans of college football meet for all of the marbles. Greetings, everybody, and welcome back in. This is round number 2 of the College Football Connection for 2025. I am Bradford Bruns. I promise, rest assured, my guys, Marty Jenkins and Alvin Reed, we will be all back together again. We will be under the same roof later in the week, provided that the elements and the weather in the STL actually cooperate for once. What an eventful start it has been to 2025, for that matter, in more ways than one, and an eventful last couple of days with respect to the gridiron. Today, we understand you are all set, you're ready to go, you're immersed in the NFL wildcard weekend proceedings, but a national championship is set for a mere week from now, January the 20th. It will be Notre Dame as well as Ohio State. So if you had basically been desiring that matchup of the proverbial blue bloods, the classic teams at the top of the CFB heap, well, congratulations, because your wish definitely fulfilled in that regard. Over the course of the next few minutes on the 101 ESPN YouTube channel, plus 101ESPN.com, we're going to relive a bit of those two third-round matchups, CFP style, to get to this point, really deconstruct some of the main points and storylines from those games, and obviously set the stage from a preliminary standpoint for you with respect to OSU as well as ND. So on Thursday, and we had a lot of time to really relive that Notre Dame-Penn State clash on Friday morning with TMA, with BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. By now, you've seen the highlight countless times, right? Drew Aller in the last minute of the fourth quarter, throwing across the field, throwing across his body, making the fatal mistake that he simply had not performed all season long. That interception allows Notre Dame to kick the game-winning field goal with seconds to go, 27-24, and Marcus Freeman, just his third year on the job in South Bend, he's going to the national title game. On the flip side, James Franklin, the much ballyhooed narrative there about his lack of success against upper echelon teams, it continues. Now 1-15 all time during his tenure in Happy Valley against AP top 5 squads. That game was nip and tuck throughout, and Aller, the decision-making process, you can certainly question as much down the stretch. Didn't have his finest game. Riley Leonard wasn't exactly nails for all 4 quarters, but made the requisite throws and used his feet when necessary to get the Irish to the grandest stage of all of them. Now, the following night, in a game that we carried on 101 ESPN, it was the Cotton Bowl to set up the winner to go up against Notre Dame a week or so from now. And these two teams, OSU and Texas for that matter, really exchanging blows, trading different blows well into the second half. We had a tie game there as well in the fourth quarter, and I think that was somewhat shocking to a lot of individuals really who went into the game and saw that number with the Buckeyes being favored by a considerable margin. You can't really quibble with that as much, right? Especially considered the way in which this team, Ryan Day's squad, absolutely dismantled the number 1 team in the country, semifinal style, Oregon, right? And prior to that, decimated a very game Tennessee outfit. Nonetheless, the second half of that game featured Texas actually more consistently winning at the point of attack. Quinn Ewers lofting a couple of nifty passes to his running backs. I thought that Sark actually and his coaching staff called a tremendous game to be able to go toe-to-toe with what Chip Kelly was trying to do. And then defensively as well, you had the Longhorns basically employing that too-high safety look, right? And essentially taking Jeremiah Smith out of the proceedings and forcing Will Howard to find more of his outlet receivers and secondary threats there. They were able to do just enough, and specifically the defense. How many times this season, even during the more arduous occasions and stretches of the Big Ten schedule, okay? Did Ohio State rely on that defense when things were not clicking on all cylinders from an offensive standpoint? And once more, with Texas on the doorstep, on the precipice of potentially tying that game and sending it past regulation to see who would ultimately get Notre Dame in the title contest, Jack Sawyer, among others, slamming the door shut. That goal line defensive stand, and you can maybe have a quandary here and there about the play calling, about pitching it back to a Blue, even a Wisner, instead of going for broke and gouging the interior of that OSU defense. But where were you going to go? We saw this against Penn State earlier in the season, months ago. We saw it when it counted the most in the first 2 rounds of CFP action. The scoop and score from 83 yards out basically salts that one away, and you have OSU moving on to take on Notre Dame in the national title game. Again, January the 20th, that is when the action is going to unfold. Game time at roughly 6:30, 6:45, who knows? You kind of understand how the pomp and circumstance will proceed in that manner, right? But on paper right now, so the initial line that came out shortly after the completion of Friday's Cotton Bowl festivities at Jerry's World, Ohio State, yes, perhaps more intimidating, more superior from a physical perspective and sheer playmakers all over the field. Favored, though, by 9.5. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the second biggest spread at first glance in a CFP championship game ever, only trailing Georgia and TCU from a couple of years ago. We remember what a travesty that game essentially was. But a few things to consider here. And yes, we fully are cognizant of the fact that Notre Dame against Penn State on Thursday even had a couple of additional offensive linemen go down. Jeremiah Love, though he was unbelievable in terms of gutting out the yardage and getting into the end zone and even hurdling people against the wishes of his coaching staff members, he's dealing with the bulky knee. Notre Dame continues to have key personnel member after key personnel member go down, and yet Freeman has consistently rallied his troops, pardon the cliche. So for Notre Dame right now to be an underdog by 9.5, Notre Dame this season, bear in mind, is 12-3 against the spread, 7-0 against ranked teams, according to the Associated Press. We're not going to make mention here of that Northern Illinois debacle because it was so long ago. It was in week number 2 of the season. And whenever Freeman and Notre Dame have been challenged to rise to the occasion and overcome the personnel losses and some of the inconsistencies up front, finding who is going to be next, identifying and being able to embrace that next man up mentality, Fighting Irish have proceeded to rise to that occasion. And the signal caller, Riley Leonard, with his surplus of past experience, yes, at Duke, but still surplus of past experience in big games from the ACC and now taking it into this realm. That is unbelievably important for this team to have that steady leadership stemming from the very top, and you certainly look at Freeman to exemplify that much as well. Now, Ryan Day on the Ohio State side, we understand that offense for the better part of the CFP, yes, there were some self-inflicted woes and mental gaffes galore, especially the first half of that game. Make no mistake about it. Down the stretch versus Texas, Travion Henderson, offensive lineman, unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. But to get to the national championship game stage now, it is there for the taking. The albatross that is Michigan, that's not going to be wiped away entirely, no matter what the outcome is on January the 20th. But Day is right there on the verge of actually getting his Buckeyes to the national championship, a team that at the beginning of the season just plus 350 to win the whole thing, according to most odds makers out there, and now minus 700 against Notre Dame, of course. I think it's going to be a fascinating matchup. We are going to explore many more of the intricacies in the next couple of days of the College Football Connection with my guys Marty and Alvin as well. Speaking of the quarterbacks, though, and we said a few minutes ago here that nobody really acquitted himself particularly well for all 4 quarters of third-round action. That goes for Leonard, too. That goes for Will Howard, who had much more pedestrian work, a much more pedestrian output against the Longhorns than he had in the previous 2 games. Across the nation as well, some interesting goings-on in that particular position area, because you have Carson Beck, who had quarterbacked Georgia, obviously, to 2 national title game appearances. And last week, in case you missed it, in the midst of all of the ridiculous weather out there and other developments from the pro pigskin game. No, he's no longer actually declaring for the NFL draft. He withdrew his name and rather went back into the portal for about 24 hours. Curious how that works, correct? Well, he's going to be a Miami Hurricane next year, and the real buzz out there is whether he's going to be bringing with him quite a few of his old receivers from Athens. Congratulations on the payday that can in no way actually be confirmed or validated, but that throws a bit of a wrinkle into the ACC picture again next season, doesn't it? When you have Cam Ward departing and Miami suddenly, out of nowhere, lands another high-profile individual. Also, from a quarterback standpoint, learned earlier this morning that Alex Orji, the man who was supposed to have been the new king at the QB position at Michigan this past season, taking over for J.J. McCarthy, at least being in that battle with Warren, etc. He was expected to have emerged as the guy. His season did not go at all as planned. The dual threat will be taking his talents to UNLV. So Barry Odom is no longer there. Jalen Catalon is no longer there, the hard-hitting safety. He's going to be a Missouri Tiger, but so many different individuals, so many different programs still in flux.
Thanks for listening to the College Football Connection podcast on 101 ESPN.